September 12, 1944, Normandy, France, 11 kilometers southwest of St. Lo. Obergefreiter Klaus Dietrich kneels beside the abandoned Willys MB Jeep, his hands trembling as he examines the engine compartment. The vehicle sits intact after its American crew fled when Luftwaffe fighters strafed the convoy. Dietrich has served as a Wehrmacht vehicle mechanic for 3 years, trained at the Kraftfahrpark Technical School in Munich, graduated top of his class. He has maintained Kübelwagens, Schwimmwagens, Opel Blitz trucks, captured French Citroëns, requisitioned Czech Tatras, Mercedes-Benz staff cars, BMW motorcycles, and a dozen other vehicle types that the Wehrmacht pressed into service. He has spent countless hours sourcing rare components, improvising repairs with inadequate parts, and keeping vehicles operational through ingenuity and desperation. The Jeep's hood stands open. Dietrich stares at the engine for 3 full minutes without moving. His company commander, Hauptmann Werner Vogel, approaches impatiently. "Well, can we use it?" Dietrich doesn't answer immediately. He reaches into the engine compartment, fingers tracing the configuration of parts. He opens the glove box, finds the technical manual printed on thick paper with detailed illustrations. He examines the toolbox mounted on the running board, containing standard wrenches sized in fractions of inches rather than millimeters. He checks the spare tire, the jerrycan mounts, the towing shackles. Everything is standardized. Everything is simple. Everything is the same. "Herr Hauptmann," Dietrich finally says, his voice barely audible over the distant artillery. "This changes everything I know about vehicle engineering." Vogel looks at him with irritation. Is it functional or not? Dietrich meets his commander's eyes. The vehicle is functional, but that's not what concerns me. Every component in this engine is identical to every other Jeep in the American Army. Every bolt is the same size. Every part has the same specifications. A mechanic with 1 week of training could maintain this vehicle, and the Americans have built hundreds of thousands of them. What Dietrich cannot articulate in that moment, what he will spend the next 6 months gradually understanding through observation and captured intelligence documents, is that he has discovered not just a vehicle, but a philosophy. The Jeep represents the culmination of decades of American mass production principles applied to military logistics. It embodies a strategic approach to warfare that Germany, despite its engineering excellence and tactical brilliance, has fundamentally misunderstood. The war has already been decided not by battlefield courage or technical sophistication, but by industrial systems that Germany cannot match and has never truly comprehended. The Wehrmacht, in September 1944, operates over 2,000 distinct vehicle types across all theatres. This is not an exaggeration or propaganda figure. Internal Heereswaffenamt reports compiled by the Waffenprüfamt, 6th department responsible for vehicle procurement document, 2,117 different military vehicle models in active service, not counting captured enemy equipment. These range from motorcycles to tanks, from light reconnaissance cars to heavy tank transporters, from ambulances to mobile workshops. Each type requires unique spare parts. Each demands specialized maintenance knowledge. Each adds exponential complexity to an already overwhelmed logistics system. The American Army in the same period operates approximately 6 primary vehicle platforms. The Willys MB and Ford GPW Jeeps, functionally identical despite different manufacturers. The Dodge WC series of light trucks. The GMC CCKW 2.5-ton cargo truck. The International Harvester M5 series heavy trucks. The Caterpillar D7 tractor for engineering work. The Diamond T model 980 tank transporter. Secondary variants exist within each platform, but fundamental components remain standardized across manufacturers. A carburetor from a Jeep can function in a Dodge truck with minimal modification. Electrical systems use identical specifications. Tires are interchangeable across vehicle types whenever possible. A mechanic trained on one vehicle can service most others in the inventory. This disparity in standardization philosophy represents one of the most consequential strategic decisions of World War II, visible not in grand campaigns or decisive battles, but in the accumulation of 10,000 small logistical realities. It manifests in a German motorcycle courier who waits 3 weeks for a replacement magneto that exists nowhere in the supply chain because his BMW R75 model requires a part no longer manufactured. It appears in an American motor pool where a farm boy from Iowa with 8 weeks of basic training performs an engine swap in 4 hours using interchangeable components and illustrated manuals designed for operators with minimal mechanical background. It crystallizes in supply depots where German warehouses stock 47,000 different part numbers, while American depots manage 9,000 components that service more vehicles with greater reliability. The mathematics of this disparity tells the story of two nations approaching the same problem with opposed philosophies. Germany designed vehicles to be optimal. America designed vehicles to be adequate in overwhelming quantities. Germany engineered for excellence. America engineered for manufacturability. Germany created masterpieces that required master craftsmen. America created workhorses that required only workers. The difference determined which nation could sustain mechanized warfare across global theaters for years of continuous operations. Dietrich's encounter with the captured Jeep in September 1944 represents a moment of revelation shared by thousands of Wehrmacht personnel during the war's final year. German soldiers, mechanics, and officers increasingly recognized that they faced not merely better equipment, but a fundamentally superior industrial approach. The realization came too late to change outcomes, but early enough to shape how participants understood their defeat. This is the story of that realization, told through technical specifications, production statistics, personal accounts, and the grinding arithmetic of industrial warfare where standardization defeated sophistication. The Kübelwagen sits partially disassembled in the Wehrmacht motor pool near Caen, its engine components spread across a tarpaulin. Obergefreiter Dietrich has been working on this vehicle for 6 days. The problem is simple. The transmission requires a new clutch assembly. The Type 82 Kübelwagen, designed by Ferdinand Porsche and produced by Volkswagen, represents excellent German engineering. The vehicle weighs 725 kilograms with a 4-cylinder air-cooled engine producing 25 horsepower from 985 cubic centimeters. Its flat 4-opposed cylinder design provides low center of gravity and excellent weight distribution. The manual transmission delivers power through reduction gears that multiply torque, allowing the lightweight vehicle to traverse terrain that defeats much larger machines. Independent suspension with longitudinal torsion bars absorbs shocks that would damage conventional leaf spring systems. The vehicle costs 3,750 Reichsmarks, manufactured entirely in Germany with precision components that meet exacting specifications. Dietrich has requisitioned the clutch assembly through proper channels. His request went to the Kraftfahrpark depot at Le Havre, which forwarded it to regional supply headquarters at Rouen, which sent it to Army Group B Logistics Command at Paris. 6 days have passed. The part has not arrived. The vehicle remains inoperational. This is the third Type 82 in his company that requires clutch replacement. The components wear out faster than specifications predicted, degraded by French roads and continuous operations. Dietrich has one spare clutch assembly, hoarded from a previous acquisition. He could install it, but that would leave him with no spare when the next Kübelwagen fails. He knows the next failure is inevitable. Meanwhile, 3 other vehicles await maintenance. A Schwimmwagen, Type 166, the amphibious variant of the Kübelwagen, requires carburetor adjustment. Dietrich has the technical knowledge to perform this maintenance, but lacks the specialized tool specified in the maintenance manual. He has improvised a substitute tool that works adequately but risks damaging the precision mechanism if misapplied. An Opel Blitz 3-ton truck requires replacement brake drums. These are completely different specifications from the Kübelwagen brake system. The parts depot has no Opel brake drums available. Dietrich has been told they might arrive in 2 to 3 weeks from a depot in Stuttgart, assuming transport can be arranged and Allied aircraft don't interdict the convoy. A BMW R75 motorcycle with sidecar requires a new final drive shaft. This part is specific to the R75 model. No substitute exists. The motorcycle has been cannibalized for other parts and sits abandoned behind the motor pool. This represents a normal week. Dietrich manages these problems through ingenuity, improvisation, and an ever-shrinking inventory of hoarded components. He maintains a secret stash of critical parts acquired through unofficial channels, traded from other units, or scavenged from destroyed vehicles. This practice is universal among Wehrmacht mechanics. Official supply channels have become so unreliable that mechanics create parallel logistics networks based on personal relationships and barter systems. A mechanic who has magnetos trades them for clutch assemblies. A company that possesses excess tires exchanges them for carburetors. The system works after a fashion, but it requires constant attention and represents catastrophic inefficiency at strategic scale. The technical specifications of the Kübelwagen reveal design choices that make sense in peacetime production, but create insurmountable problems in total war. The vehicle uses a ZF manual transmission with 4 forward speeds and 1 reverse. This transmission is precision engineered with close tolerances requiring skilled machinists to manufacture. The clutch assembly consists of 17 separate components that must be assembled with exact specifications. The air-cooled engine demands specific cylinder clearances and requires periodic valve adjustment by trained mechanics. The torsion bar suspension uses specialized steel alloys that maintain properties under stress. Every component represents advanced engineering that performs excellently when new and properly maintained, but becomes increasingly difficult to service as supply chains deteriorate and skilled labor becomes scarce. Volkswagen produced approximately 50,435 Type 82 Kübelwagens between 1940 and 1945, along with 14,276 Type 82 Kübelwagens 166 Schwimmwagens. These production numbers seem substantial until compared with American equivalents. Willys Overland and Ford manufactured 640,000 Jeeps between 1941 and 1945. The disparity reflects not only industrial capacity, but design philosophy. The Kübelwagen required approximately 800 man-hours of labor to produce, including precision machining and skilled assembly. The Jeep required approximately 300 man-hours, using semi-skilled workers and assembly line techniques that minimize complexity. More critically, the Kübelwagen shared virtually no components with other Wehrmacht vehicles. Its air-cooled flat-4 engine was unique to Volkswagen products. Its ZF transmission was specific to this application. Its torsion bar suspension existed nowhere else in the German military inventory. Maintenance required Volkswagen-specific knowledge and Volkswagen-specific parts. A mechanic expert in maintaining Opel trucks knew nothing useful about Kübelwagens. A parts depot stocked for Mercedes-Benz vehicles had nothing applicable to Volkswagen products. Every vehicle type added multiplicative complexity to logistics and maintenance. Hauptmann Vogel approaches Dietrich on the 6th day of waiting for the clutch assembly. The battalion commander requires vehicle status reports. Vogel carries a clipboard with standardized forms that demand specific information about operational readiness. How many vehicles are fully operational? How many require minor maintenance? How many require major repairs? How many are total losses? These categories seem simple but obscure complex realities. A vehicle awaiting a single part might be mechanically perfect, otherwise yet completely useless for operations. A vehicle with multiple problems might be mobile if one critical component arrives. The reports generate statistics that higher headquarters uses for planning, but those statistics bear limited relationship to actual capabilities. Dietrich provides his assessment. 3 vehicles fully operational, Herr Hauptmann. The 2 Kübelwagens, the Schwimmwagen, and one of the Opel trucks require parts we do not have. The BMW motorcycle is beyond field repair. The other Opel truck is operational, but requires brake service within 200 kilometers. Vogel writes this down. When will the parts arrive? Unknown, Herr Hauptmann. I have submitted requests, but received no confirmation. Vogel looks at his mechanic with frustration that is not personal. He understands the situation as well as Dietrich. The maintenance problems are systemic, not the result of individual incompetence. Still, battalion headquarters demands answers that Vogel cannot provide. Can you keep vehicles mobile through improvisation? Vogel asks. This is the real question. Official procedures and proper maintenance standards have become theoretical considerations. The practical question is whether mechanics can keep machines functioning through whatever means necessary. Dietrich considers his response carefully. I can extend operational life by deferring scheduled maintenance and taking risks with improvised parts. This will result in catastrophic failures eventually. Some vehicles will suffer permanent damage that could have been prevented by proper maintenance. We are trading future capability for present availability. Vogel nods. Continue that trade. We need operational vehicles now more than we need theoretically perfect vehicles next month. This conversation reflects reality throughout the Wehrmacht by late 1944. Proper maintenance has become impossible. Standardized procedures exist in manuals, but not in practice. Vehicles operate far beyond recommended service intervals. Mechanics improvise repairs that would result in immediate failure of peacetime safety inspections. The system continues functioning through the skill and dedication of men like Dietrich, but those men recognize they are managing inevitable decline rather than maintaining sustainable operations. Every day, more vehicles become inoperational. Every week, the gap between German and Allied mobility widens. Every month, the arithmetic of attrition becomes more devastating. The captured Jeep that Dietrich examined represents everything the Kübelwagen is not. The Willys MB weighs 1,040 kilograms with a 4-cylinder L-head engine producing 60 horsepower from 2,199 cubic centimeters. Its power-to-weight ratio significantly exceeds the Kübelwagen, despite using less sophisticated engineering. The engine is a simple cast-iron block with overhead valves, technology that dates to the 1920s but proves extraordinarily reliable. The manual transmission has 3 forward speeds and 1 reverse with a 2-speed transfer case providing 4-wheel drive. The suspension uses conventional leaf springs rather than exotic torsion bars. Every component is designed for ease of manufacturing and replacement rather than engineering elegance. The Jeep costs approximately $738 to manufacture in 1944, equivalent to roughly 2,952 Reichsmarks at official exchange rates. This makes it cheaper than the Kübelwagen, despite being heavier, more powerful, and more capable. The cost differential reflects production efficiency achieved through standardization and mass manufacturing techniques. Willys Overland operates assembly lines where semi-skilled workers perform repetitive tasks rather than skilled craftsmen building individual vehicles. Components arrive from subcontractors who produce millions of identical parts rather than small batches of custom specifications. More significantly, the Jeep shares components across American vehicle types. The electrical system uses standardized voltages, connectors, and switches found throughout American military vehicles. The wheels and tires are identical to those on Dodge trucks, allowing tire interchange across vehicle types. The carburetor design appears with minor variations in multiple vehicle models. The starting motor, generator, and ignition system use common specifications. A mechanic trained on Jeeps possesses knowledge applicable to maintaining the broader American vehicle fleet. A parts depot stocked for Jeeps also serves multiple other vehicle types. Dietrich completes his examination of the captured Jeep over several hours. He removes and inspects the spark plugs, finding them worn but functional and absolutely identical to each other. He examines the carburetor, discovering a design so simple that adjustment requires only a screwdriver and basic understanding of air-fuel ratios. He looks at the distributor, the fuel pump, the water pump, recognizing that every component prioritizes accessibility and simplicity. The engine has no hidden spaces requiring special tools. Every bolt can be accessed with standard wrenches. The technical manual in the glove box contains detailed exploded view diagrams showing exactly how every part fits together, with instructions written for readers with limited mechanical background. He finds something else in the glove box that stuns him: a parts requisition form. The pre-printed form lists common replacement parts with stock numbers. A driver experiencing mechanical problems simply circles the required components and submits the form to the unit supply sergeant. Parts arrive within days, sometimes hours, depending on theatre logistics. The system assumes that parts will be available because production is massive and distribution is efficient. This assumption proves correct. American forces rarely experience the chronic parts shortages that cripple Wehrmacht operations. Dietrich discovers one additional element that crystallizes his understanding. Stamped on the Jeep's data plate are production codes indicating it was manufactured at the Ford plant in Michigan in March 1944, 6 months before his examination. The vehicle has thus been operational for half a year in combat conditions. It shows wear, but no fundamental degradation. The engine runs smoothly. The transmission shifts cleanly. The chassis exhibits no cracks or failure points. American vehicles are designed for replacement rather than repair, built with the assumption that they will be discarded or rebuilt after 18 to 24 months of service. German vehicles are designed for longevity, built to last decades with proper maintenance. In sustained warfare, the American approach proves vastly superior because it matches production capacity to operational reality. Vogel returns while Dietrich completes his examination. You understand it now? The Hauptmann's question carries no mockery, only weary recognition. Dietrich nods slowly. They've built a system, not just a vehicle. Every part is the same. Every tool works on every model. Every mechanic can service every unit. They don't build excellent vehicles. They build adequate vehicles in quantities that make excellence irrelevant. Vogel stares at the distant sound of American artillery. We're not fighting soldiers anymore. We're fighting factories, and we lost that war before the first shot was fired. The numbers tell the devastating story of German vehicle diversity versus American standardization. Wehrmacht records from Waffenprüfamt 6, declassified after the war and archived at the Bundesarchiver Militärarchiv in Freiburg, document the catastrophic scope of Germany's vehicle inventory problem. The September 1944 report, compiled for Generalfeldmarschall Wilhelm Keitel, lists 2,117 distinct vehicle types in active Wehrmacht service. This figure excludes captured enemy vehicles, which add another 1,300 types. The diversity emerged from multiple factors: Germany's limited pre-war automotive industry that lacked standardization across manufacturers, the practice of requisitioning civilian vehicles for military use, the incorporation of vehicles from occupied territories, and the tendency of German manufacturers to introduce incremental improvements that created new variants rather than maintaining strict component compatibility. This diversity manifests in every vehicle category. Motorcycles include BMW R12, BMW R75, Zundap KS 750, DK WNZ 350, NSU Kettenrad HK 101, and dozens of lighter models from various manufacturers. Each requires unique maintenance procedures and spare parts. Light cars and reconnaissance vehicles include the Kübelwagen Type 82, Schwimmwagen Type 166, Steyr 1500A, Hoch 108, BMW 325, Mercedes-Benz 170V, and captured vehicles like the French Citroën Traction Avant and Czech Tatra 57. Medium trucks include Opel Blitz in multiple variants, Mercedes-Benz L3000, Magirus M3000, Bussing Nag 4500A, Henschel 33, and Ford Fi 3000. Heavy trucks include Mercedes-Benz L6500, Krupp L2H43, Fornell 900D 567, and the Vomag 70R660. Half-tracks include the SDKFZ series from 250 through 251 with dozens of sub-variants. Command and staff cars include Mercedes-Benz 770, Porsche 901, BMW 326, and numerous captured luxury vehicles. Ambulances, mobile workshops, artillery tractors, tank transporters, and specialized vehicles add hundreds more types. Each vehicle type requires unique spare parts inventories. The parts warehouse supplying a Wehrmacht division must stock components for potentially 150 to 200 different vehicle models simultaneously in service. A clutch assembly for a Kübelwagen cannot be used in a Schwimmwagen, despite both being Volkswagen products. A carburetor for an Opel truck has no application to a Mercedes truck. A magneto for a BMW motorcycle differs entirely from a Zundat magneto. The arithmetic of parts inventory becomes nightmarish. If each vehicle type requires 100 unique components, and a division operates 150 vehicle types, the parts warehouse must stock 15,000 different part numbers. In reality, each vehicle type requires far more than 100 unique parts. A complete parts inventory for all Wehrmacht vehicles would include approximately 47,000 distinct components. American forces, by contrast, standardize ruthlessly from the beginning of rearmament. When the US Army begins mechanization in the late 1930s, it establishes the principle that vehicle manufacturers must build to common specifications using interchangeable components. The 1940 Standardization Act codifies this approach, requiring that any vehicle purchased by the military must incorporate components from a pre-approved list of standardized parts wherever possible. Manufacturers compete for contracts not by offering superior engineering, but by demonstrating ability to produce vast quantities of adequate vehicles using common components that simplify maintenance and logistics. The Jeep emerges from this philosophy. In July 1940, the Army issues specifications for a quarter-ton reconnaissance vehicle and requires submissions within 49 days. Willys Overland submits a design that wins the contract, but Ford is brought in as a second manufacturer to ensure production capacity. The Army insists that both manufacturers build absolutely identical vehicles using interchangeable parts. The only differences are manufacturer markings. A Ford GPW and a Willys MB are functionally the same vehicle. Parts interchange completely. This eliminates competition between manufacturers on specifications and redirects it toward production efficiency. The same standardization applies across vehicle types. The GMC CCKW 2.5-ton cargo truck uses the same 270 cubic inch inline-six engine that appears in multiple vehicle applications. The Dodge WC series trucks share electrical components with Jeeps. Tire sizes are standardized across vehicle categories whenever possible, allowing battlefield tire swapping and reducing inventory requirements. The goal is creating a vehicle ecosystem where component commonality minimizes logistics, complexity, and maximizes maintenance efficiency. The production numbers reflect the success of this approach. American industry manufactures 640,000 Jeeps between 1941 and 1945. GMC and Chevrolet produce 812,262 of the 2.5-ton cargo trucks. Dodge builds 255,000 WC series trucks. These figures represent just primary vehicle types. Total American military vehicle production reaches approximately 2.5 million units during the war years, not counting tanks and armoured vehicles. This production comes from fewer than a dozen primary vehicle platforms. Germany produces approximately 345,000 military vehicles between 1939 and 1945 across more than 2,000 distinct types. The disparity is not primarily about industrial capacity, though American factories dramatically outproduce German ones. The disparity reflects design philosophy and standardization strategy. The consequences manifest in maintenance statistics compiled by both armies. Wehrmacht vehicle operational readiness rates decline steadily throughout the war as spare parts become scarce and maintenance becomes increasingly difficult. By September 1944, average operational readiness across German motorized divisions hovers around 55 to 60%, meaning that nearly half of all vehicles are inoperational at any given time due to maintenance issues or parts shortages. Some divisions report operational readiness as low as 35%. These figures exclude vehicles destroyed by enemy action and count only those that could theoretically be made operational if parts were available. American vehicle operational readiness exceeds 85% across most theaters throughout the war. This reflects not superior vehicles, but superior logistics. When an American vehicle requires maintenance, parts arrive quickly from well-stocked depots. When repairs exceed field capability, the vehicle is evacuated to a rear area maintenance facility, where specialized equipment and trained personnel perform rebuilds. When a vehicle is beyond economical repair, it is stripped for salvageable parts and replaced with a new vehicle from the production stream. The system assumes abundant supply and operates accordingly. Wehrmacht Oberst Friedrich Wilhelm Hauck, Chief Logistics Officer for Army Group B in France during 1944, described the differential in a post-war interview archived at the US Army Military History Institute. We calculated that the Americans operated approximately 80,000 trucks supporting their forces in France by September 1944. Our intelligence estimated that 90% or more were operational at any time. We operated perhaps 18,000 trucks supporting forces in the same region, with less than 60% operational. This meant the Americans had effectively 72,000 available trucks compared to our 10,800. The ratio was not 4-1, but nearly 7-1 when accounting for operational readiness. And their trucks were larger with greater cargo capacity. We couldn't match their logistics even if we'd had twice our actual vehicle inventory. The differential extends beyond simple numbers to maintenance efficiency. An American motor pool sergeant with 3 months of training can maintain jeeps, trucks, and light vehicles using standardized procedures and abundant parts. A Wehrmacht mechanic with years of experience still struggles to maintain the diverse vehicle inventory because each type requires specialized knowledge. American maintenance manuals are written for 6th grade reading levels with extensive illustrations. German maintenance manuals assume technical education and often reference specialized tools that exist only in factory settings. American maintenance philosophy prioritizes keeping vehicles operational by any means necessary. German maintenance philosophy emphasizes proper procedures and factory standard repairs that often cannot be accomplished in field conditions. Unteroffizier Hermann Bauer, a Wehrmacht mechanic captured at Aachen in October 1944, spent the remainder of the war at a prisoner camp in Kansas, where he volunteered for the motor pool. His experience provides direct comparison of maintenance systems. In post-war testimony to Army historians, Bauer observed, American mechanics approach problems with practical directness that would have been considered improper in Wehrmacht service. They didn't consult technical manuals extensively. They didn't worry about maintaining specifications. They fixed problems quickly using whatever was available. I watched a young corporal who couldn't have been more than 20 replace a Jeep transmission in less than 3 hours, using only basic tools. The replacement transmission came from another Jeep that had been wrecked. He simply unbolted the old one, bolted in the new one, and the vehicle was operational. In German service, this operation would require specialized equipment and take 2 days at minimum, assuming the replacement transmission was available at all. Bauer continued. The most shocking thing was parts abundance. The motor pool had shelves filled with spare parts, all organized by standardized stock numbers. When something broke, the sergeant simply looked up the number and retrieved the part from inventory. If inventory was low, he submitted a requisition and new parts arrived within days. In German service by 1944, submitting a parts requisition meant waiting weeks or months with no guarantee the part would ever arrive. American mechanics could be wasteful because abundance made waste irrelevant. If they couldn't fix something quickly, they'd simply replace the entire component. If a vehicle required too much work, they'd cannibalize it and request a replacement vehicle. The logistics system supported this approach because production exceeded consumption, even accounting for waste. The Red Ball Express, the famous American truck convoy system that supplied forces advancing across France from August through November 1944, demonstrates standardization's operational advantage. The Express operated 6,000 trucks in a continuous loop from Normandy beaches to forward supply depots, delivering 12,500 tons of supplies daily at peak operations. The system worked because standardization enabled rapid maintenance and maximized vehicle availability. Trucks returning from forward areas entered maintenance checkpoints where mechanics performed rapid inspections and quick repairs. Parts were abundant. Mechanics were trained on standard procedures. Damaged vehicles were pulled from the cycle, and replacement vehicles entered immediately. The Red Ball Express achieved operational readiness of approximately 88% throughout its operation, an extraordinary figure considering the intense use and poor road conditions. Wehrmacht planners studying reports of Red Ball operations through intelligence channels couldn't comprehend how Americans maintained such high readiness, with vehicles operating 20 hours daily on damaged roads. The answer lay in standardization, common parts, simple repairs, abundant inventory, and production capacity that allowed rapid replacement of vehicles beyond field repair. Captain James Darby, a transportation officer with the 517th Quartermaster Truck Regiment supporting Red Ball operations, recorded in his diary, "Our trucks take tremendous abuse. They run continuously with minimal maintenance. Drivers push them hard because they know replacement vehicles and parts are available. We have mechanics stationed at key points along the route, performing quick fixes and sending vehicles back into service within hours." The entire operation depends on component interchangeability and parts abundance. Without standardization, this level of sustained operations would be impossible. The contrast with German logistics operations is stark. Wehrmacht supply columns in 1944 use whatever vehicles remain operational, often combining horse-drawn wagons with trucks from multiple manufacturers. These mixed columns move slowly because horse-drawn elements limit speed. They are vulnerable because diverse vehicles break down frequently and cannot be quickly repaired in field conditions. German logistics officers plan operations assuming 40 to 50% vehicle availability and build in substantial time buffers to account for inevitable mechanical failures. Major Georg Hartmann, supply officer for the 116th Panzer Division in September 1944, described the situation in a letter to his wife discovered after the war. "Every movement becomes a logistical nightmare. Our trucks are from 6 different manufacturers. When one breaks, we often lack the specific part needed. We've taken to carrying mechanics who specialize in different vehicle types, but even that doesn't solve the problem when parts simply don't exist. Meanwhile, we watch American columns moving past with thousands of identical trucks. When one fails, they simply move it aside and continue. They repair it later or abandon it and bring up another. They have the luxury of waste. We must make every vehicle last because we cannot replace it. The mathematics of standardization reveals its power through simple calculations. Consider a force of 10,000 trucks from 100 different manufacturers, requiring an average of 50 unique parts per manufacturer. The parts depot must stock 5,000 different components. If each component type requires minimum inventory of 100 units to ensure availability, the depot needs 500,000 parts in stock. Now, consider 10,000 trucks from a single manufacturer using standardized components. The parts depot stocks perhaps 300 different components. At 100 units each, inventory drops to 30,000 parts. The standardized system requires 94% less inventory to maintain the same number of vehicles with higher reliability. This arithmetic extends to mechanics training. Training a mechanic to service 100 different vehicle types requires extensive education, covering diverse systems and technologies. That mechanic still cannot possibly master all variants and will inevitably encounter vehicles he's inadequately prepared to service. Training a mechanic to service 6 standardized vehicle types takes weeks rather than months and produces operators who can maintain any vehicle in the fleet with confidence. The American system generates adequate mechanics rapidly. The German system requires extensive training to produce specialists who still cannot address the full diversity of Wehrmacht vehicles. The standardization advantage extends to manufacturing efficiency. Building 100,000 vehicles across 50 different designs requires retooling factories for each variant, training workers on different procedures, sourcing unique components from specialized suppliers, and managing complexity at every production stage. Building 100,000 vehicles of a single design allows optimizing the assembly line, training workers on repetitive tasks requiring minimal skill, sourcing massive quantities of identical components from suppliers achieving scale efficiencies, and eliminating complexity through standardization. The result: American automotive factories produce vehicles faster, cheaper, and in greater quantities than German factories, despite German engineering excellence. The human cost of this differential becomes apparent in Wehrmacht soldiers' experiences during the war's final year. Units increasingly abandon vehicles not because they're destroyed, but because they cannot be maintained. Soldiers march on foot, while functional vehicles sit immobile for lack of a single unobtainable part. Combat effectiveness declines not from losses in battle, but from inability to move, maneuver, or supply forces in mechanized warfare's mobile environment. Gefreiter Hans Schmidt, an infantryman with the 352nd Infantry Division, wrote in a letter found on his body after he was killed in December 1944, "We've left behind more vehicles than the Americans have destroyed. They sit beside roads waiting for parts that never arrive. It's maddening to abandon a truck that needs only a simple component, but if that component doesn't exist in the supply chain, the truck becomes useless metal. Meanwhile, we march 30 kilometers per day carrying full equipment, while American soldiers ride in trucks so numerous they seem endless. Mobility wins battles. We've lost mobility, therefore we've lost the war." The captured intelligence documents that Wehrmacht units obtained throughout 1944 provide glimpses into American logistics systems that German officers find almost incomprehensible. A captured American field manual on organizational maintenance describes procedures assuming parts availability and rapid replacement. A captured supply requisition form lists hundreds of standardized part numbers with expected delivery times measured in days. A captured motor pool report shows operational readiness rates above 90% sustained over months. These documents circulate among German logistics officers who recognize they describe capabilities Germany cannot match. Oberst Hauk, in his post-war interview, reflected on reading these captured documents. "We knew the Americans had superior logistics, but seeing their actual procedures documented revealed how vast the gap had become. They had systematized everything. Part numbers were standardized. Requisition procedures were simplified. Delivery times were reliable. Maintenance was straightforward. They had built a logistics machine that functioned smoothly because standardization eliminated friction at every level. Our system, by contrast, required constant improvisation, personal initiative, and tolerance for chaos. Their system assumed abundance and operated efficiently. Our system assumed scarcity and operated inefficiently. The difference determined who could sustain mechanized operations and who could not. The American standardization philosophy extended beyond vehicles to encompass the entire logistics system. Fuel cans were standardized, the famous jerry can that Americans copied from German designs and produced by the millions. Ammunition was standardized across weapon types whenever possible. Rations came in standardized packages. Medical supplies used standardized components. The entire approach prioritized interchangeability and commonality over optimization and excellence. Each individual component might be merely adequate rather than optimal, but the system as a whole proved vastly superior to German approaches that sought perfection in each element while creating chaotic complexity in the aggregate. The philosophical difference reflected deeper cultural and industrial divergences. American mass production culture, pioneered by Henry Ford and refined through decades of automobile manufacturing, emphasized breaking complex processes into simple repetitive tasks that semi-skilled workers could perform efficiently. German manufacturing culture emphasized craftsmanship, with skilled workers building quality products through extensive training and careful attention to specifications. Both approaches had merits in peacetime. In total war requiring sustained production of millions of items, the American approach proved overwhelmingly superior. This difference was not primarily about inherent American advantages or German weaknesses. It reflected strategic choices made decades before the war. The United States in the 1920s and 1930s had developed mass automobile culture with widespread civilian ownership and massive production infrastructure. Germany, in the same period, had limited automobile production focused on luxury vehicles for elites and had never developed mass-market automotive culture. When war came, America simply scaled up existing systems and redirected production. Germany attempted to build from scratch the industrial capacity and standardization practices that America had spent decades developing. The attempt failed not from lack of effort or engineering skill, but from insufficient time and resources to transform industrial culture in the midst of global war. The final months of the war saw Wehrmacht vehicle operations deteriorating toward collapse as fuel shortages combined with maintenance problems to paralyze remaining forces. Units that still possessed operational vehicles often could not use them because fuel no longer reached forward areas. Units that had fuel often lacked operational vehicles because parts remained unavailable. The logistics system that had struggled throughout the war disintegrated entirely as Allied bombing destroyed remaining factories, infrastructure, and supply depots. Obergefreiter Dietrich's experience in the final weeks exemplifies this collapse. By March 1945, his unit possessed 3 operational vehicles from an authorized strength of 28. 1 Kübelwagen, 1 Opel truck, and 1 BMW motorcycle remained mobile. All other vehicles sat abandoned or had been destroyed. Parts requisitions went unfulfilled because the depots themselves had been evacuated or destroyed. Fuel allocations dropped to nearly zero. Dietrich's specialized training and years of experience maintaining diverse vehicle types became irrelevant when no vehicles could be maintained. The unit moved on foot, carrying weapons and essential equipment, abandoning everything else, including vehicles that required only minor repairs to remain functional. American forces advancing into Germany in early 1945 encountered thousands of abandoned Wehrmacht vehicles, many in repairable condition, but immobilized by lack of parts or fuel. American maintenance units occasionally put captured German vehicles into service, but quickly discovered why German logistics had failed. A captured Kübelwagen might run adequately, but obtaining spare parts proved impossible. When the vehicle required maintenance, American mechanics had no compatible parts in inventory. the vehicle would be abandoned after the first mechanical problem. This experience reinforced American commitment to standardization and influenced post-war vehicle development. The occupation period after Germany's surrender saw American forces operating thousands of vehicles across occupied territory, while German civilians witnessed the logistics system that had defeated them. Former Wehrmacht personnel, including mechanics like Dietrich, found employment in American motor pools, where they observed firsthand the practices they had encountered only through captured equipment during the war. Many would later contribute to rebuilding Germany's automotive industry, applying lessons learned from both sides' approaches. The legacy of this story extends far beyond World War II. Modern military logistics remains built on standardization principles that Americans perfected during the war. NATO standardization agreements ensure that Allied forces can operate together using compatible equipment and common supply chains. Commercial logistics worldwide adopts practices derived from World War II American military logistics, including standardized components, interchangeable parts, and streamlined maintenance procedures. The entire modern global economy depends on standardization practices that trace their military applications to the 1940s. The German automotive industry that emerged after the war synthesized lessons from both approaches. Companies like Volkswagen built on their wartime experience while incorporating American mass production techniques and standardization philosophy. The result was vehicles combining German engineering precision with American manufacturing efficiency and commonality. The Volkswagen Beetle, one of history's best-selling automobiles, embodied this synthesis. Simple, reliable, manufacturable in vast quantities, maintainable by mechanics with basic training, designed for the masses rather than elites. The mechanics who maintained both German and American vehicles during the war understood these lessons intimately. They had seen both systems operate. They had worked with vehicles designed according to different philosophies. They knew which approach worked better under combat conditions. That knowledge informed their post-war work rebuilding Germany. When they trained young mechanics, they emphasized lessons learned the hard way. When they designed new products, they prioritized manufacturability and reliability over theoretical excellence. When they consulted on processes, they advocated for standardization and simplification. Former Obergefreiter Klaus Dietrich, working as a civilian mechanic in Hamburg in 1952, gave an interview to a German automotive trade journal reflecting on his wartime experiences. I spent 3 years trying to maintain Wehrmacht vehicles with inadequate parts and impossible complexity. Then I spent 6 months in American captivity, maintaining their vehicles with abundant parts and deliberate simplicity. The contrast taught me more about engineering philosophy than all my formal training. The Germans built beautiful vehicles that required master mechanics. The Americans built adequate vehicles that anyone could maintain. In sustained warfare, adequate vehicles in abundance defeat beautiful vehicles in scarcity every time. We learned that lesson through defeat. The fortunate thing is that we learned it. The mathematics that Obergefreiter Dietrich first glimpsed when examining that captured Jeep in September 1944 told a story about modern industrial warfare that Germany had never fully understood. Standardization wasn't glamorous. It didn't produce vehicles that won engineering awards or impressed technical specialists. It didn't appeal to the German cultural emphasis on craftsmanship and quality. But it worked. It worked on scales that Germany couldn't match and with reliability that German systems couldn't achieve. It worked not through superiority of individual components, but through the emergent properties of systems designed for simplicity, commonality, and mass production. The war was decided not by the Kübelwagens' excellent engineering or the Jeep's adequate performance. It was decided by the fact that America built 640,000 Jeeps, while Germany built 50,000 Kübelwagens. It was decided by the fact that American mechanics could maintain their vehicles, while German mechanics hoarded rare components and improvised repairs. It was decided by the fact that American logistics delivered parts reliably, while German supply chains disintegrated under complexity. It was decided by the fact that American industry standardized ruthlessly, while German industry maintained diversity excessively. Germany built better vehicles. America built more of the same vehicle. Same one. That simple mathematical reality determined the outcome of mechanized warfare more surely than tactical brilliance or strategic genius ever could. The mechanics who maintained vehicles understood this truth with particular clarity because they lived it daily. They watched excellent engineering become irrelevant through parts shortages. They witnessed adequate design prove superior through abundance and simplicity. They experienced the harsh lesson that in total war, the side that can sustain operations through standardized mass production defeats the side that creates masterpieces it cannot maintain or replace. This lesson, paid for in millions of lives and immeasurable suffering, remains relevant wherever complex systems must function under stress. Standardization sacrifices optimization for reliability. It accepts adequacy over excellence. It values commonality over uniqueness. These trade-offs seem like compromises until systems must operate at scale under difficult conditions. Then standardization reveals its power through sustained functionality when optimized complexity fails. The Wehrmacht mechanics, who first recognized this truth, did so too late to change outcomes, but early enough to ensure that future generations of engineers and logistics planners would understand that in sustained operations, same wins.